Today is April 19th edition of Back Roads of Illinois with Cesar Delgado. We were Central Illinois agriculture source and in the Midwest alongside in Central Illinois for the agricultural industry. We were glad you're here. I am your host, Cesar Delgado. We were going to visit Sam Hudson out of Broomfield, Illinois for Corn Belt Market Incorporated. We were talking about geopolitics and supplies and demand for the grain. We will talk about commodities markets as well. I have a crop progress report from Mark Schlusiner with the Department of Agricultural Field Office in Springfield, Illinois. Then I'll be telling our listeners about yesterday's meeting with Dr. Temple Grandin in Urbana and Champaign at the University of Illinois. This is your agricultural news for this morning on Back Roads of Illinois. Mexico has bought 5 tons of U.S. corn for last week from the United States. We know that Mexico has purchased 3 tons of U.S. soybean last week. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Brazil has low yielded their corn on Monday. Agricultural Agency and their estimate that is pretty bearish from the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimate report on last week from the United States Department of Agriculture. Finally, Illinois farmers are fighting against the wetlands bill as in Springfield. This bill could affect the wetlands and the farm. We were coming back with Sam Hudson for Corn Belt Marketing and your crop progress report with Mark Schlusiner from the Department of Agricultural Field Office in Springfield. Stay tuned. Welcome to join us on Back Roads of Illinois with Sam Hudson out of Broomfield, Illinois for Corn Belt Marketing. How are you, Sam?
Doing well, Cesar. Thanks for having me today. Spring's here.
Let's start with our conversation on the corn planting in central Illinois near Peoria between Macomb. What do you see in the countryside? Can you give us an update from the field?
Well, we've got a pretty decent start on bean planting around here. Not so much from corn with these cold temperatures here over the weekend and some rainfall. Guys have kind of put the brakes on that. Saw soil temperatures jump up into the low to mid 60s actually, which is unseasonably warm for this time of year anyways. But this again, these weekend's temperatures are going to bring them back down, and then it comes down to seeing when we can dry out and warm up again. It could be kind of a pause on things into the end of the month though, and if you start to stretch delays out into that second week of May, then markets may finally get a little bit nervous. But at this point, we got plenty of time, and farmers can get it done pretty quickly.
Yes, I saw a lot of tractor in central Illinois near Bloomington and Champaign yesterday.
Yeah, they're getting going. Like I said, not a lot done. Got a lot ahead of us, but we'll see what Mother Nature provides as far as getting back in the field here.
What is the forecast for acreage report on June 30th and March 28th from the Department of Agricultural? What is your takes on that?
I think we'll, continue to see a desire to plant corn as long as there's a, availability to do it again from the weather. What USDA put out there in March, I feel like corn acres could certainly grow from there. I kind of have a bias that soybean acres could fall just a little bit in lieu of something like cotton and some of these other specialty crops. But at the end of the day, the area is not going to be the big indicating factor here, unless it's just that we can't get in the field. It's going to have to come down to a yield problem if we're going to see sustained strength, because demand just hasn't been strong enough. And so, again, a lot of pressure on things over the next 3 or 4 weeks to get in. But then once it is, what's going to be the reason to come off of these trend yields and facilitate a rally? Because policy at this point, I think, is probably one of the biggest enemies leading up to this election.
Sam, how do the commodity markets, along with the inflation rate, which means that the supply and demand are stronger for the future?
From an inflationary standpoint, we've got those tailwinds, but we also have to trade our own markets. And, I mentioned the policy. I think how we unfold and unravel this biofuel desire for biofuel demand, I think, is going to be key and critical, because we're continuing to carve ourselves out of the export market on the world front. We did that with ethanol, and if we fail on those domestic demand programs, all of a sudden we got to go back out there and try to find ourselves, at lower prices to get back into that export market. And so I think that's the biggest thing, on its own. Just because things are inflated doesn't mean we have to rally prices. But I do think it's one of those things to think about here over the next 10 years in general, not only for corn and soybeans, but really just the price of everything.
How are the grain market for today's close bell in downtown Chicago?
Not very good. We continue to see lack of fresh news to come into the marketplace. South America is harvesting their crop. We're getting ready to plant another one. And so, again, unless you start to threaten the supply side, which it doesn't appear we're doing that today, prices are going to be, kind of weak. They've been somewhat directionless from a volume standpoint. We haven't found a lot of willingness, but there's always going to be that natural seller out there when you've got plenty of supply. And so, how much people carry out into summer, I think, is definitely something to consider, because the cost of interest has gone up. Price of commodities has not.
How about the November beans?
We've really struggled. There's another thing. We continue to see record crush here domestically. Again, in an effort to probably capture some of this demand that's supposedly coming on the biofuel side of things, biodiesel. But in that vacuum or uncertainty, we continue to build stocks, soy oil stocks, soymeal stocks. And again, without a problem supply threat in South America, they're continuing to feed the world and meet that demand. You look at China year over year; they've imported quite a lot more soybeans. They're just not doing it from the U.S. And the same is true with corn and some of these other products, such as wheat. And so it's not that demand's terrible. It's that we've kind of lost our leverage in being the first in line. And the only way we get that back is if someone else fails. And so we have not seen that in South America this season. I think our best chance here is that we find a base in South American pork prices, maybe curtail the South American production just enough to give us a story if we get into any adverse weather here in the U.S.
Now that we were going to talk about the livestock market for today on this morning.
Yeah,
How is the cattle markets for today?
A little bit better on the feeders, live cattle, just trying to find their bearing with this whole avian flu situation. We got a cattle on feed report coming out tomorrow. And so the market's been a little bit content with finding a little bit of a higher territory for this weekly trade anyways. But at the end of the day, it's going to have to be led by the cash markets higher. You're going to have to get this fear and the headlines behind us. And I don't know how long that takes. The media seems to play things out a lot more than sometimes they need to, and position it however they frame it. And that can certainly have an impact on things. But if you see the cash market buck those trends, I think you got to look out for higher prices into this summer, assuming the economy isn't going to pot.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy for right now.
It is. We've seen a lot of capitulation, a lot of up and down. A lot of talk about LRP, and just understand where your margins are when markets move this fast, and gotta be locking it in when you can.
Would you like to go to talk about cattle markets for the bird flu and dairy herd and the feeder cattle? Could
I don't know.
Explain to our listeners about your sources?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have a really good beat on it. I think at this point, I think it's kind of confusing to me. how something can be framed and deemed a problem. All of a sudden, we've seen that happen in the media several times over the last several years with big stories, small and large. And so I think this is no different. At the end of the day, this actually could end up being a more bullish catalyst down the road, especially if it stimulates additional demand. So don't want to get too caught up in trying to anticipate or predict when they're going to decide it's okay. But at this point, I think we have to kind of move forward that the status quo is going to continue. We're not going to change the numbers of it. I think it's, again, a long-term opportunity to probably see higher prices eventually, but the economy has to stay intact as well. I think we've got a good chance of doing that through summer, but after the election, I think it's going to be an interesting road.
I agree with you, especially the news that they don't understand about the agricultural industry.
Yeah. Common problem these days. It seems like the detachment between Main Street and Wall Street, right?
Finally, do you have any final thoughts, or do you want to go to have last takes about commodities markets with your commentary?
I don't. I think we're kind of stuck in an unfortunate situation where we're waiting for some policy to potentially give us some bullish optimism for not just this year, but really the next 5 to 10 years, and potentially developing a bigger demand leg here domestically. And so until we see guidance on that, until we have confidence on that, I think it's going to be hard to find a footing unless we get that supply problem. And unfortunately, in an election year, I just think you're going to continue to see that impasse. I don't think anyone's going to want to take a real hard stance on it. Just seems like agriculture becomes another political football when you got things like that going on. So I think you got to keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle and understand what type of risk you got out there. And again, stay profitable before you can.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Cesar.
This is Sam Hudson out of Broomfield, Illinois for Corn Belt Market Incorporated. We are back with
Schleusner, state statistician for Illinois with the USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service. I'm reporting on crop progress and conditions for the week ending Sunday, April 14. Warm weather impacted all of Illinois last week, and temperatures averaged 57.5 degrees. That was 7.6 degrees above normal for the Prairie State this time of year. The average rainfall across the state was nearly 1 inch, just slightly below normal, but most of the state received less than normal rainfall. Southern and eastern areas had higher rainfall amounts. There were 2.3 days suitable for field work around the state last week, and topsoil moisture was rated 5% very short, 10 short, 64 adequate, and 21% surplus. Soybean planting advanced by 2 percentage points and reached 4% finished. That compares to 3% 1 year ago and 1% for the 5-year average. Corn planting reached 3% finished compared to 7% last year and 4% normally. The Illinois winter wheat crop was 5% headed, compared with 2% 1 year ago and 3% for the 5-year average. The condition of the crop improved from 1 week ago and was rated 6% very poor to poor, 16% fair, and 78% good to excellent. That is better than 1 year ago. Pasture conditions also improved from last week and were rated 1% poor, 33% fair, and 66% good to excellent. That is better than 1 week ago and a little worse than 1 year ago. Finally, soil temperatures range from the mid-50s in northern Illinois to the upper 50s in southern Illinois, with a few readings in the lower 60s in central Illinois. I would like to thank the people that responded to the crop progress and condition report this week. We appreciate your assistance in telling the story of Illinois agriculture. This has been Mark Schleusner with the Heartland Region Illinois Field Office of USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service in Springfield.
Thanks to Mark Schleusner from the Department of Agricultural Field Office in Springfield for this week's crop progress report. Welcome back to join us for today's program. I visited the University of Illinois in Urbana and Champaign for a conference with Dr. Temple Grandin in Urbana. It's pretty fun to miss work since Monday. but it is pretty important to learn about animals' behaviors and livestock health with her as well. Otherwise, I enjoyed it. Thanks to Dr. Temple, Grandin in Urbana and Champaign at the University of Illinois. We were visiting with Jason Minter from Bloomberg News and Mac Marshall from the United Soybean Board. Ted S. from Xanner Hedges out of downtown Chicago. We were talking about Brazil's soybean production and then here home. Don't want to miss tomorrow's discussion panel with them. That's our show on Back Roads of Illinois. Otherwise, thanks to listening on Back Roads of Illinois. For Back Roads of Illinois, I'm Cesar Delgado. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.